So I think we're gonna go ahead and dive right in. Welcome everyone to today's Behind the Science, a Wednesday web chat, where we get to highlight all of our fantastic researchers and learn more about them. I'm Madeline Arancibia from the Outreach and Engagement team, and I'll be your host as per usual. Today's chat is gonna feature Dr. Tracy Mincer. Tracy has been at Florida Atlantic University for 2 years, and he actually has a dual appointment here. So he works both on the Harbor Branch campus and at the Harriet Wilkes Honors College in Jupiter. One of his main research interests is understanding the fate of plastic marine debris and their association with microbes. And he also does work in natural product discovery and microbial ecology. So we'll get to learn a lot about him today. I have a couple of questions for him, and then we also want to hear the questions from you guys as well. So there's some instructions on your screen now. If you're on Zoom, you can go ahead and use that Q&A button in the bottom center of your screen to ask your questions throughout the whole chat. If you're watching on Facebook, we want to hear from you guys too. So you can ask your questions in the comments and we'll get to those as well. So without further ado, Tracy, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's get your mic on.
Sure. Hey,
there we go.
Can you hear me? All right.
Yeah.
And I'll get my video going here.
Perfect. All right.
Yeah, great.
So yes,
okay.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, and happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, before we get into all of my questions, we'll start with, can you tell us 3 things that we should know about you?
Yeah, right. Let's see. I grew up in Alaska, and my father is an artist. So I grew up in the art world, and I guess I have 2 daughters, and kind of, I guess in Alaska, I grew up all surrounded by men, and now I'm surrounded by females. It's great. It's all balanced out now.
That's definitely a new adventure, I'm sure. A little different than what you're used to. So you grew up in Alaska. Was there something of the environment there that inspired you to pursue a career in science, or was it completely different?
Yeah, right. No, exactly. That's a great question. And, you know, there's really no real reason why I should be a scientist in many ways. I mean, I'm a first generation college student, so I never really was exposed to scientists or even really, you know, many people that had ever been to college early in my life. But I think being surrounded by nature and also, you know, I think art and science really are very similar in the sense that they really are an explanation of a way that we explain the world around us, right? And so, yeah, I mean, for many years I worked as an artist on my own, in my own right, earned a living doing that. But I really, I just kept going back to college and once I just kind of stuck. I just kept going and went on to my graduate work as well. And just some of my friends who had never been to college kept asking, like, you know, when you getting out? Like I was in jail or something. But it really, it was just a great thing for me. What I loved is the whole idea of being able to pursue something and learn as much as you could. And I just love learning about nature, and I love teaching as well.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. Being a scientist can feel like you're in school forever, but hopefully it never actually feels like jail. So you grew up in Alaska, you did school, you got a bunch of different degrees. How did you get to where you are now in your career?
Yeah, right. It took me a little longer. In Alaska, I would drop in to college and go for a semester or 2, and then run out of money or whatever. And then I worked at different jobs, everything ranging from, working at a gold mine as a cook to being a mechanic to, all these different jobs really. I was a commercial fisherman for a bit. And then I decided to finally finish off my degree because I got really interested in microbiology. Finish off my degree down in San Diego, and so I made the trip and got into University of California, San Diego, to finish off the last couple of years of my school. In my degree in chemistry and biochemistry, with a lot of emphasis and working in the laboratories as well. There I had a lot of lab experience. I really liked the hands-on part of that, being in the lab. And so then I got a position as a technician at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and kept working with microbes, and then it worked out to be a graduate position at Scripps for a Ph.D. In the laboratory of William Fennicle, in microbiology and natural products chemistry. And from there, it just took off and made sense to me. I really enjoyed that part of it. I had a great graduate project that I'll talk about a little bit, the next questions. But yeah, it was a long road for me, just finding my way. But it was great. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Awesome. Okay, so I have some new questions just in the last few minutes.
Yeah.
What type of art do you do? What's your medium?
Oh yeah. So my father is a sculptor, and so I worked in doing sculpture as well. And up in Alaska, they dig up these walrus tusks that have been in the ground for tens of thousands of years, as well as mastodon and woolly mammoth tusks, right? And these massive chunks of ivory that have been in the soil for 40,000 years. And so they take on all kinds of colors, and they're not fossilized, but they're so-called mineralized. So it still has the qualities of the ivory, but it has this really rich colors ranging from blue to oranges, and it's really fantastic material to work with. And so my father started working with that, and I worked with it a bit too. I've done some work in lost wax process with bronze. So you make a wax sculpture, and then they make a mold from that, and then you make additions of bronze from that. Various kinds of subjects, wildlife and some abstract things, and I've made furniture, things like that. Always enjoyed working with my hands. So.
Okay, so what do I need to Google to see images of this walrus tusk artwork? Because that sounds beautiful. I
know, right? Yeah, you know what? You can find some images online of mammoth ivory, and they still to this day dig it up. Certain rivers along the cut bank where there's erosion, all of a sudden the tusks will just come out of the ground. And like elephants, they had a common kind of grave site. And so where you find one, typically there's many tusks.
Okay, I know what I'm Googling tonight when I get home. And then my other question, because you totally threw me when you said that you worked in gold mines. What was that like? Yeah,
that was really interesting stuff too. I mean, it's very, very Alaskan thing. And I guess, I honestly, I didn't know how to really operate heavy equipment much. I'd done some, and they asked me, could I drive a bulldozer? And I said, yeah, which I couldn't, but I figured it out. And I also became a cook as well at these gold mine sites, cooking for 30, 40 men, all men there. And it was, interesting job and different. And I just, really, I love traveling. I love having different experiences. And after high school, in between college breaks and stuff, I did a lot of that. Any chance I had to do something different or go somewhere new, I said yes, you know, yeah.
You are a man of many talents, it seems. Well, okay, so I'm gonna go to, what's the coolest place your work's taken you? If you love traveling so much, you must have some cool stories.
Yeah, I have to say, I really enjoyed, we did a lot of field work in my graduate career. I did a lot of field work and some in my postdoc as well. But my favorite place is really in Baja, Mexico, the Sea of Cortez. It was fantastic. I had the opportunity to be on Prince of Saudi Arabia's ship, a ship called the Golden Shadow, Khalid bin Sultan ship, and fantastic crew, and really a great opportunity. I spent over a month in the Sea of Cortez, just being able to have this amazing resources, you know, diving, 2 dives a day, and, you know, small boats so we could get out anywhere we wanted to be, and collect samples, and a full lab to be able to work in. It was just like a dream come true. And it's just so wild there, even to this day. I mean, I remember there was a storm, and there's some big waves, and so we had safe harbor, but we walked along the beach afterwards, and there were just shrimp piled up on the beaches like a foot high because of the waves, and the conditions had just, you know, blown these shrimp in onto the beach. It's just fantastic. Just an amazing, amazing place. I love it.
Oh my gosh, you are rapidly becoming the most interesting person I've talked to. So getting into some of your research projects, of the projects you've worked on, what's been your favorite so far?
Right. You know, I have to say, and there's been a lot of cool stuff, and I've been really fortunate. But looking back, and I guarantee if I asked my colleagues who were involved in this project as well, they'd say the same thing. Is when I was a graduate student, I was very fortunate to have just an amazing project of working with these microbes that came only from the ocean, but they had relatives that lived on land, and the relatives to these microbes are called actinomycetes. They sort of look like fungi, but they're bacteria. And they are basically what are known to be the foundation of the antibiotic, the discovery of antibiotics, and really the modern drug industry. Finding new drugs from diverse microorganisms. When we found these microbes from the sea, what was so exciting is that they required seawater to live, and we looked at their genetic signatures, and they were so different from anything else ever found that they warranted their own genus. So it means that they had many, many different species related to them, and they only lived in the sea. And what's even more, yeah, here's a picture of them. We named them the Selenospora, and we discovered them right around Halloween as well, and so they're orange and black. It's pretty cool. You can see the pigments there, the red pigments and the brown pigments coming out. And we knew there was something that were really going on with them, because when contaminating fungus here at the bottom corner, you can see on that culture, you can see that it won't even come near those other colonies, and that they're making some kind of chemistry that's inhibiting that growth. So we ran them through a cancer assay. And what we found is this molecule on the far right, selenosporamide, now marketed as a full-on real drug for cancer, for treating multiple myeloma. And this drug is marketed as marizomib. It is a absolute lifeline for people that have multiple myeloma that is resistant to other therapies. This is the only drug that can be administered that has not shown any resistance at all. And it's also now in phase 3 clinical trials for glioblastoma. And that's a very difficult to treat brain cancer. And just, again, an absolute lifeline for these individuals. What's even more remarkable is that we had a close family friend who was able to get into the early clinical trials, and it extended his life significantly. And I've met people as well that have had their lives saved from this drug. So it's pretty amazing.
That's really awesome that it's had personal connection for you too with your work. That's pretty impressive for sure.
Yeah, it was a really an amazing opportunity, and my colleagues that I worked with on that, Rob Fielding and Paul Jensen, and then my advisor Bill Fennicle as well. It was just, it's one of these things that it just kept going, you know, like when we all figured out the structure, thought, oh, it's too unstable, it'll never make it as a drug, and it made it, you know, and then, well, you know, it's got these problems or those problems or whatever, and it just cleared every hurdle, and it really is like a 1 in 10,000 type of experience to see and just see something just take on a project, just take on a life of its own. It's very exciting. You know, it's got licensed by companies, and then being able to work as a consultant with those companies and see how they grew this, and it turned into just a real product that's saving lives is really something.
Awesome. Well, continuing on the research theme then, since you've done some impressive things, have you ever had a project that has provided a surprising result that led to something exciting?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, that's, I think that's really, I mean, when I teach, and I really try to bring that excitement for when you know, students see new results for the first time. I mean, that's what keeps you coming back, you know, to the lab every day, I think, you know, and one of those fun experiences was when I had a colleague, and we were discussing about, you know, plastic in the ocean, and they were heading out to sea to collect some samples. And I put together real quick a sampling kit and said, wait a minute, let's look for microbes on these plastics, you know, and let's just see what, you know, microbes are settling on plastics in the open ocean. We came back and we worked up those samples, and yeah, this is what these plastics, you know, look like. Out at sea, they become confetti, little bits, right? When we first looked at pieces of plastic, what we found by electron microscopy were that microbes were just like eating right into the plastic and actually transforming it and degrading it. And we just thought, not only that, it wasn't just a once-off thing. It was about a third of the samples we looked at were being degraded by plastics, or the plastics were being degraded by the microbes. And from then on, I was hooked. I mean, and working with the problems of that plastics that don't make it into the waste stream and escape, right? You know, end up in the ocean. Yeah, this is the image exactly right here. You can just see these, and you can even see the cells dividing here where they're kind of close together. And that means these cells are growing at a pretty rapid rate, and actually burning through that plastic material, which is pretty phenomenal, I think. And so this is the these kinds of discoveries really just really keep me coming back to the lab, and continue to inspire you know, people that are part of my group, and we're just really excited about understanding this problem of plastics in the oceans, and what we can do to inform policymakers more, and really and so just really understand how plastics, what happens to plastics when they get smaller and smaller in the oceans, and what the real risks are and what we can do to keep them from getting into the waters and minimize the risk, right?
Yeah, you basically are already answering my next question of how does this apply to our lives? Clearly, I mean, microplastics are something that everybody is starting to know about. We showed that article a little earlier that was you talking about microplastics. It's something that does affect us, but can you go into a little bit more of that for us?
Yeah, you bet. I mean, plastics are have become a necessity in our lives, and it's important that that we use. They're an amazing material too, right? And so it's important that they're used wisely. And I think we've become a bit complacent about the use of plastics and not disposing of it properly, clearly. And this is ending up in places that we don't want it. And for the very reasons that plastics are great. They're durable, you know, incredibly tough. They last a very long time. And these exact properties are what makes them not so good in the environment, because they can last a long time. They move in an unnatural way, and they can actually mimic food. You know, many birds think that this is prey, and so they eat it and it doesn't digest, right? And as this stuff gets smaller and smaller, it also starts to collect into smaller grazing types of animals, zooplankton and so on. And so really, we want to fully understand, and my group is starting to get into working with nanoparticles now and understand what nanoparticles are doing. You know, there's evidence that suggests that they're making it so phytoplankton can't photosynthesize efficiently. They create these small, tiny nanoparticles actually create reactive oxygen and make and stress out the phytoplankton. And so that's a problem for oxygen production on our planet, really. You know, we get inhibition of photosynthesis and should be getting things growing in that top layer of the ocean and raining down and feeding others. And instead, we could be inhibiting that. And the plastics, as well, as they get smaller and smaller, as you can see from this figure, they interact in many different levels. One of the more surprising findings that we found just recently really is that as plastics, what we think is happening is, and it was surprising, is that we took samples from the center of the ocean in the gyre, right? And we took samples from coastal regions. And we looked at them for their oxygenated, like the amount of them, amount of the plastics that's oxidized and aged, really, and weathered. And what we found is that by their chemical index, the things along the coast that we thought would be younger, right, and not as oxidized, were much more oxidized, and things in the open ocean were not. So we've completely flipped our thinking, and we realized what we think is happening is that things are up on the beaches weathering and degrading, because that's a more efficient process. And then storm action brings the plastics back into the ocean, and then it sits along the coast. Sometimes and the things that do make it into the open ocean weather at a much slower rate and are appear much younger, really. And so that's actionable. That's something that we can do, is that, you know, and we found very high amounts of plastics along the coast as well in the South Atlantic. And so that's something that could be solved by a beach cleanup, right? That's something we can, as you know, volunteers and citizen scientists and so forth, you know, we can take that into our own hands and clean that up. And also says too that beach cleanups really matter. And so I think it's a very hopeful note, really, regarding the issue of plastics in the ocean.
That's definitely encouraging, and hopefully we can all get back to that soon. So a quick reminder before we carry on, we definitely want to hear what questions you guys, the audience, have. So please go ahead and use that Q&A button, middle center of the screen on Zoom, or comment your questions on Facebook, because we'll be getting to those questions in just a few minutes. So my next question for you is, if you were not a scientist, what profession would you be doing, do you think?
Yeah, that's a good one. And I think I love to write, and I'm getting more into that. I think I would become a writer, and do more of that. I love telling stories, be them scientific stories or fiction, and I really love that aspect, and I'm being even more and more drawn to that form of art as I get older.
Awesome. Art in many forms in your life then, sculptures
Yeah.
and reading.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to a young person or future scientist who wants to pursue ocean science as a career?
Right. First, I tell them there's plenty of room. I think they really, they're welcome aboard in a sense, and that there's many different ways that one can pursue ocean science, and many different aspects. What's becoming more and more abundantly clear is that big data approaches are yielding new ways to see the ocean, right? So any kind of training, if a young person is still looking at classes to take or expertise to gather, tool sets to put into their resume, right? It's really, I think, computers, big data analysis, those kinds of things really are yielding major insights now in all aspects of oceanography. It's, from biology to climatology and so forth. It's really just phenomenal how important it is for computer science and big data for us to be able to see as if you will, a macroscope instead of a microscope, right? And see these big inner workings and how the world is really so connected. I mean, in the class I teach microbiology, I start with a satellite image of Earth. And, people think, oh, this professor's crazy. I took a microbiology course and he's showing me the Earth, but it's really, it's a way to see our planet and how microbes are driving, and they're the heart and lungs of our planet, and how it's all coming together to make the planet breathe and work. And when it doesn't work so well, we get a dysbiosis, we get an imbalance of these microbes, and that can create a toxic bloom, right? Or, a dead zone in the ocean, for example.
Definitely. Big picture is becoming more and more important for sure. So my last question before we get to questions from the public, what do you think is the most fascinating thing about the ocean that most people don't know?
Right, yeah, that's a good one. And I think one of the things that surprised me about the ocean is that there's actual real structure to it. And when and I started viewing the ocean almost as a living tissue, if you will, right? And so when we are on a ship and we send down Niskin bottles, right? We take water samples. It's like taking a biopsy of the ocean, right? There's these different layers. I mean, it's really just a thin rind, really, of the ocean we know the best, and that's the photic. As you head down, let's say 200, 300 meters or so in clear water, light can't make it any farther, and it starts to become this twilight zone and then absolute darkness for the rest of the ocean. And that's really a bulk of what's there for the oceans. That's that mesopelagic area. Everything there that lives down there and deeper depends on everything else above, on the world above it, to feed it. Right? So it's completely dependent. And there's just these different layers as we go through the ocean. And as things get smaller and smaller, they see the ocean very differently. Water is syrupy. It's like living in honey for them. It's very thick. And it's another thing that's always surprising, I think, to students when you teach them about these so-called low Reynolds numbers of the ocean. And it's that, you know, you watch high-speed photography of tiny, tiny little zooplankton feeding, and it's like syrup that they're stuck in.
That's crazy. I didn't know that. So again, I'm learning something new. So we're going to get into some questions from the public now. So again, another reminder, please ask your questions, anything that you might think of for Tracy. You can ask them either on Zoom or on Facebook. So the first question that we have here actually is from my aunt. She is asking if you know our cousin, Bob Hessler, who also worked at Scripps.
Oh, Bob Hessler?
Yeah. He was also a marine scientist, but he might not have been your department.
Right, but I know the name though. I've heard the name before, for sure. You know, maybe we met, you know, there used to be, at Scripps, we always had these, we called them TGs, and it was on Fridays, we'd all there was one of the old cabins from the old days was still on the beach, and we'd all gather there and have a beer or whatever, and sit and chat. And I think, anyway, yeah, maybe I met him there.
Okay. That some people might not realize that's actually a pretty common thing with scientists, is to do those happy hours with the departments and all. So next question is from Skylar. Could microbes serve as a solution to the plastic crisis we're facing? Is that an area that you plan to continue to research?
Right, yeah. One of the things we're looking at now is, I mean, first off, if plastic's big enough, we can recycle it, right? But when things get smaller and smaller, like fibers, for example, one of the most abundant things found in wastewater treatment plants are fibers from clothes washing. And almost all of those fibers are some kind of polyester. And so we're looking at microbes that can liquefy and depolymerize that to keep wastewater treatment plants from sending those fibers back out. So they concentrate it, they purify, and they sterilize and clean up all the water, but they have no way of trapping the fibers, and those just escape back out and send them right back out in the environment. As these fibers get smaller and smaller, they can get, again, incorporated into living animals and create problems. And so we want to work with wastewater treatment plants and be able to rid these fibers from the waste cycle, from the discharge of wastewater treatment plants. And the numbers really add up. It's like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of tons of these things that escape and head back out into the waters. So that's definitely one thing we're looking at, is depolymerization of plastics, very small things.
Awesome. Next question here is from Claire. She says, so you're a traveler, what's the next place you think you want to visit?
Oh man, that's a great question. And I have always, and I've never been, I've always wanted to go to Africa. And I would love to just spend several months just traveling around the various areas of Africa. I have some friends and colleagues there, and I've just always wanted to go there, and Australia. Those are the two places are next on the list, really.
I can definitely vouch for Australia. I was lucky enough to study abroad there. It's amazing. I highly recommend it. Yeah. The next question here is from Robert, and I'm not sure that I fully understand it, so hopefully you do. What's the status of the MG nodule mining in the Pacific? Is it really going on now? Do you understand that question?
Okay, so MG mining. So I mean, I know there's these manganese nodules that are on the sea floors, and there's also just in general to kind of cast a wider net with that question is deep sea mining, right? A lot of rare earth minerals there, and there's actually a stunning amount of gold in the seafloor. And there's a few companies now involved in making very, very deep sea, like abyssal type seaworthy robotics that can handle that, 1,000 atmospheres of 1,000 to 5,000 atmospheres of pressure and get down there, mine the minerals, and bring them back to the surface. So it's a real challenge, but there's a real payoff as well. There's a lot of scientists concerned that certain habitats could be destroyed, right? As with any mining, it has to be done wisely. And it's also international waters, so there's very few rules in place for that. It's a, kind of a wide open Wild West thing, if you will. And so a lot of people are sounding the alarms about how this could be a chance for a lot of destruction as well.
Okay. Well, that's more than I knew about it. So the next question here is from Felicia, asking, what is the most rewarding part of your job?
Right. Yeah. I really love to learn every day. I think it's just great. And I really enjoy communicating and writing this scientific discoveries, and I love teaching. I never get tired of it though, is discovery, finding something new, right? And I just really love the stories that come out of that, and exploring the world, and just like one of those, oh wow, that's how that works. That's really interesting, and I think it makes me more fun at parties as well. So
yeah. Well, that's cool. Discovery is always rewarding for sure. The next question is from Ryan, asking, if you could have dinner with anyone living or dead, who would it be?
Wow, yeah. Living or dead. Yeah. I always, I'd love to, I'd love to meet like some of the, there's a language problem, I guess, but some of the ancient Greek philosophers, Plato and Socrates, so forth. Yeah, but while we're going back in time, it'd be cool to see dinosaurs too. I'd love that.
All right, our next question is from Bobby. If you could be any ocean animal, what would it be?
Oh, wow. Ocean animal. Yeah. I do like, I think, I don't know, I think sea lions are pretty fun. They seem like they have a pretty fun time out there and enjoy life. I guess that's what I do.
Okay. So actually, going back to a question I didn't have time to ask earlier about animals, what is one of the coolest animals that you've encountered throughout your work?
The work? Yeah. We were diving in the Sea of Cortez and ran across an entire pod of sea lions. And when we were, it was pretty amazing because they were so curious with us, and we had I had a regulator, it was chrome, and it's just some shiny spots, whatever. And they were just so really taken by that. And then they started barking at us all around. And one of them barked so close to my face mask, it just shook my whole head, and I could like see right down, into the mouth, and like, whoa, okay, maybe time to call this dive, But it was really fun. I didn't feel threatened, but it was just like they were really playing with us, yeah, so that was a fun discovery. Thank you. There you go.
Yeah. Sea lions, I can definitely say, are very playful animals. Okay. I think we've got time for one more question here. Let's see. From Jeannie, going back to the microbes breaking down plastic. Do they break them down into just smaller and smaller pieces that are still dangerous to organisms, or do we know what's happening when they're essentially eating those plastics, is what it looks like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we are, in some ways, yes, they're perforating and they're weathering the plastic and making it break down into smaller bits. But they also, when they do act, we can do this in controlled settings and have the plastic just completely liquefied and gone as well by the enzymes. And that's about having it small enough and having it trapped and having it completely covered with the right bacteria, right? Now in nature, it's more likely that they're creating fragments, and then once things are small enough and just floating around on their own, a microbe can't settle on something smaller than itself, right? And so that's where it could be, some of these microbes could be, rather than a blessing, a bit of a curse, because they're breaking things down into smaller bits in the natural environment. But we think we can control this, in the lab and under controlled engineered settings, and have them work to our advantage.
Awesome. Lots of things to still explore.
Oh, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Tracy. It's been great getting to know you and hearing about all of your adventures and different skills.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. And again, great being part of this, and you all are doing a terrific thing. Keep at it.
Thank you. And then, of course, thank you to the audience for asking some fantastic questions along the way as well. For next week's Behind the Science, it's going to feature Dr. Annie Page Cargin. Annie is both a researcher and a veterinarian here. So she has her doctorate in veterinary medicine and a Ph.D. in veterinary pathology. So she acts in those two roles as a researcher studying epidemiology and ecology of infectious diseases in marine mammals and sea turtles, and then also acts as our clinical veterinarian for the Marine Mammal Stranding Program. So definitely join us next Wednesday, May 6th at 4 p.m. to hear more about her. And in the meantime, if you want to learn more about Harbor Branch, then definitely visit us online at www.fau.edu, where you can learn more about our research. And you can also visit our virtual resources landing page, where you can see all of the fun things we've got available for you guys online, including all of the previous episodes of Behind the Science. Thank you so much again for joining us this week, and hopefully we'll see you next week, and you're staying healthy and you have a wonderful evening. Bye.
Thank you.